His breathing became uneven as I shifted beneath him. One arm shook near my head, fingers clutching the bed sheets like he was trying to hold onto reality itself. A quiet sound escaped his lips, not dramatic or loud, but raw and broken, vibrating through his chest and into mine. I should never have let things go this far. From the very start, I should have kept my distance. But the weight of his body above me, the warmth coming from his skin, the uncertain way his hips moved, everything felt painfully real, filled with wanting. His movements showed he wasn't experienced. Instead, they came from desperate need, confusion, and that clumsy, almost painful nervousness that only someone too young to understand what could happen shows when they try to navigate something they know deep down is wrong. He kept looking at me like he expected me to change my mind any second, like I might push him away and tell him this was all a terrible mistake. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled him closer around his waist, feeling the heat between us grow stronger. I brought him nearer, losing myself in the feeling, sensing every shake of his body echoing inside me. His hands pressed flat on the mattress, knuckles white as he struggled to stay in control in this charged moment, weighed down by what we were doing, the choices I had made, the path I had started us on. When he buried his face in my neck, letting out a soft, trembling breath, I closed my eyes and gently placed my hand on the back of his head. The ceiling stared down at me, a harsh reminder I didn't want to face. I tried to push away thoughts of where we were, how late it was, and the disturbing reality of our age gap. I just wanted to feel the excitement of being wanted again, to experience the warmth of a touch that reminded me I was still alive, still desirable. I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation. Not at 38, not with a young man who had a curfew just 2 years ago. Not with someone whose mail I sometimes picked up, who once asked if his packages were safe by the door because he worried about thieves. Not with someone who wore headphones in the hallway, who accidentally called me Mom the first time we talked. Not with someone young enough to be in photos with my son at Little League when they were both 10. Back then, I was just a tired mother with sunscreen and folding chairs. Yet here we were, and I was the one with my fingers tangled in his hair. What would you do if the man who brought back your passion was young enough to be your son's friend? The thought never entered my mind the night he moved in downstairs. It didn't even occur to me when he casually asked to borrow the spare key after locking himself out. It happened slowly, without invitation. The night I caught him staring a moment too long, then looking away like the weight of shame, was something he didn't yet understand how to carry. His name is Ryan, a young man of 22, maybe 23 now. I stopped asking about birthdays. I got tired of doing the math. He moved into the apartment below me after my previous tenant suddenly broke their lease. I managed the small duplex that became mine when my father passed away. It's nothing special, 2 floors of old wood and creaking stairs. I live upstairs. The downstairs unit has usually housed quieter tenants, older couples starting fresh chapters, a woman with 2 cats who left behind an interesting smell of mint mixed with tuna. Ryan was nothing like what I expected. He arrived with moving boxes and a smile that seemed naturally charming, polite, relaxed. He always paid rent on time and never forgot to say thank you when I gave him the Wi-Fi password or shared notices from the homeowners association. For a while, that's all it was, until it became something completely different. It started with something that seemed harmless. He would pause when I said hello, ask about my day like it actually mattered. He began doing small things, offering to carry groceries, cleaning the shared driveway without being asked. There was that time he helped fix a broken light in my stairwell. I never asked him to. He just saw it hanging loose and offered to help, and I let him. I invited him inside, not just the upstairs hallway, not just crossing the normal boundaries between landlord and tenant, but breaking down every wall I'd built since my divorce 3 years earlier. Ever since Evan, my son, left for college, since I stopped being tied to anyone as a wife or mother, everyone's main concern. The warmth of another person that night, I was wearing my pajamas, nothing flattering, just a faded t-shirt and old shorts. My hair was pulled back in a way that clearly showed I wasn't expecting company. He came by because of a leak under his kitchen sink. Again, I told him I'd look at it in the morning. He hesitated, looking uncertain. Then he said he didn't want to bother me, but he was completely lost about what to do down there. So I went. I followed him into the dim lower apartment, my bare feet silent on the cool floor. He handed me a flashlight. Even though the lights worked fine, I knelt down, my fingers touching the cold pipes under the sink. When the flashlight came on, it showed a steady drip, each drop falling rhythmically into a metal bowl below. "I can fix this," I said, still kneeling. When I turned to say something else, I found him uncomfortably close, not inappropriately, just not quite far enough away. When he leaned in, his shoulder brushed mine, creating a spark of tension. He smelled like clean laundry mixed with something warm that hung in the air. His eyes dropped, then came back up, and he smiled slightly. "If it gets too expensive, I can pay for a plumber myself." I stayed quiet, his voice got softer. "Are you okay?" I can't remember what expression I had when I looked at him. Maybe something cracked. Maybe I showed more than I meant to, but something changed. When he moved closer and I let him, it happened right there in his kitchen, with the sound of that leaky pipe dripping behind us. With my back against the old counter, his lips found mine like he was afraid I'd disappear if he let go. I never disappeared. I leaned closer. Let him touch me like every second counted. Let him sigh softly against my skin. Let him in. Before we continue with our story, I want to ask you to show support by liking and subscribing. Not everyone will understand these stories, but if you've made it this far, you know that the deeper you go into these tales, the more the platform shows these stories to others who share the same curiosity. And that means more fascinating stories coming your way. Let's continue. That night lasted forever without any real sleep. I lay there in the darkness, the sheets clinging to me like they could hide what had happened. I kept replaying every moment, every quiet breath, every pause between unspoken confessions. His presence still felt heavy on me, how warm his skin had been, how careful his hands were when they first touched my sides, and how that uncertainty turned into desperate hunger. The guilt started creeping in long before morning came. I turned 40 last December. There was no drama, no big party, no life-changing moment. Just a quiet dinner with a few coworkers who raised glasses of cheap wine and gave the half-hearted compliment, "You don't look a day over 35." I went home, washed off the makeup that hid my real face, and stared at myself in the mirror for what felt like hours. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I guess I just wanted to see if the world had changed somehow. It hadn't. 3 years had passed since my divorce. Evan was busy with college life far from home. I filled my days to avoid the silence. I worked from home 3 days a week. My weekends were spent quietly organizing closets and carefully touching up paint on walls that no one else noticed. I tried dadding once. It lasted through 2 awkward dinners, and ended with an uncertain kiss under dim parking lot lights. The man, Brian, sold real estate and called me sweetie while spending most of our meal talking about his various allergies. When he kissed me, it felt more like checking something off a list than any real tenderness. Definitely not. I wasn't ready. I never looked at Ryan that way. At first, anyway. He moved in after the woman downstairs left without warning. She had taken a job across the country, leaving her keys in the mailbox with a short note and a $100 Starbucks gift card. I posted an ad online. A few days later, Ryan showed up, bright eyes, well-groomed, asking good questions. Fresh out of community college, working from home in something digital, looking for a temporary place while he saved money for graduate school. He seemed polite, maybe a little shy, wearing an oversized sweatshirt, smelling faintly of peppermint. That first day, he asked if I was the one who managed the building. "I live upstairs," I said. "My father left me this property. I just try to keep it from falling apart." He gave me a smile that seemed genuinely nice. "That sounds pretty dependable." That was it. Nothing suggestive. No warning signs. Just a young man eager to make a good first impression. I told him he could move in the following week. At first, it was simple. He was quiet, played music, sometimes soft and atmospheric. Sometimes I'd hear his footsteps moving across the floor, a gentle presence that never bothered me, just existed. He'd nod when we passed on the sidewalk or in the shared entryway. He held doors open. He always wished me well when he checked his mail. It was maybe a month before we had our first real conversation. I had just come back from the grocery store, carrying 2 heavy bags and nursing a sore back. He was sitting on the porch, bent over, carefully fixing a screw on his bike pedal. I must have looked tired because he stood up and asked, "You okay? Just creaky bones," I joked. He laughed softly, a knowing look in his eyes. "Age is just a number." I raised an eyebrow, curious about where this was going. "How would you know?" He gave that casual shrug that seemed to mean nothing important. "Your posture has the grace of someone who does yoga. My mom does yoga. At 50, she has energy that could easily leave me behind." I smiled slightly. "Flattery will get you nowhere." That wasn't flattery. Our conversation went on a bit longer that day. He told me about his job, something about improving customer experiences. He hated it, said it felt like being a digital babysitter. I told him I used to work in marketing. He looked surprised. "I figured you were in law or something." "Why, because I wear cardigans and correct your grammar," he grinned. "Exactly." It felt easy, almost too easy. In the weeks that followed, those small moments started happening more often, each one filled with tension that couldn't be ignored. Small gestures, unspoken words, and delicate moments that stayed just out of reach. A gentle knock on my door asking about garbage pickup schedules. Once he left a note with fresh banana bread. "Sorry if the music was too loud, peace offering." It was barely a whisper of sound. I had no idea, but I kept the note. It sat on my kitchen counter for 3 days before I finally threw it away. After that, everything shifted, not suddenly, but slowly over time. He started lingering in conversations, maintaining eye contact longer than before. His compliments became softer, but they hung in the air with tantalizing intensity. "That color really looks good on you," he said as I came down the stairs in my navy dress. It was nothing special. I had worn it to a neighborhood association meeting. But the way he said it, with quiet reverence, caught me off guard. He held my gaze for a moment longer than expected, and I didn't correct him. In that instant, I felt the very foundation of our world tremble and shift just slightly. The change became a lingering ache, subtle but persistent, hiding in the shadows. I started listening for the sound of his footsteps below me. I watched his car come and go with keen interest. I began cooking dinner a little later, letting the smell of garlic and butter drift through the vents, hoping he might find some reason to come knock on my door. I felt ashamed about that, overwhelmed by the rush I felt when his eyes lingered on me like I was more than just his landlord, like I was something irresistible he wanted to explore. The final breaking point came when he walked through the door, breathless and sweating, his shirt stuck to his skin from his run. He paused on the porch, catching his breath, and looked up at my window. I froze there, feeling like a character in a romance novel, hardly believing he would notice me there. But he did, and he smiled slightly. It wasn't the smile of a tenant being polite to his landlord. It was something else, something quiet and bold and complicated, and I didn't move away from the window. I stood there and watched him go inside. That night I didn't sleep much either, because no matter how many reasons I gave myself to let it go, to put that boundary back where it belonged, the truth had already settled in. He didn't look at me like I was just older. He looked at me like I was still someone worth wanting. And part of me, some forgotten, quiet part, wanted him back. It was never supposed to go beyond that. A smile through a window, a kind word at the door, a shared look that lasted a beat too long, followed by nothing. That's what adults do. You feel something inappropriate. You acknowledge it quietly, if only to yourself, and then you close the door. You don't let it grow. But I didn't close it. Not completely. Throughout my day, there were countless small moments that let him slip in. A knock on my door when his internet went down. "Can I borrow your Wi-Fi for a minute?" What started as a simple request turned into 30 minutes of him at my table, fingers moving over his laptop, casually drinking the tea I offered. It felt like part of some unspoken routine, like we were revisiting a familiar dance we had performed many times before, like we were just two people sharing the same space. But I was far from ordinary. He was never a friend. He was never my equal. I had been through 2 marriages. I had paid property taxes. I kept a drawer full of warranties and receipts, each one proof of the responsibilities in my life. I had a son who was only 2 years younger than Ryan. Ryan was an outsider in my kitchen. Yet he made himself into someone I wanted, not with arrogance. He never tried to win me over with charm, never got too close. He never called me beautiful. He was too careful for that kind of mistake. Instead, it was the smaller things. He remembered I liked mint tea, casually bringing home a box from the store without being asked. He returned my containers after washing them first. He replaced the porch light one day, taking a moment longer to test the switch even though we both knew it worked fine. When he came over, he always stayed, never in a hurry to leave. Once when I was out for a walk, I found him sitting on the top porch step, elbows on his knees, staring at the sky like he was trying to escape the loneliness of his apartment. "You okay?" I asked. He turned slowly, like my voice had just registered. "Yeah, just need to keep it down a bit, you know." I understood that feeling. I sat down next to him, our knees almost touching, staring into nothing. The sun was low in the sky, casting everything in golden light. The air was thick with the smell of dry leaves and barbecue smoke drifting from a few houses down. We didn't talk. It had been a while since I'd done that. But there was weight to that silence, building inside me, almost suffocating. I started keeping my blinds slightly open after dark, not wide, but enough to light up the shared porch. While I stood at the sink washing dishes with my hair pulled back, I'd catch glimpses of him, his silhouette moving through the soft light, lingering just long enough for me to feel his eyes on me. He never said anything about it. Neither did I. Then came the day he asked if I wanted help moving some boxes. I'd been cleaning out the upstairs closet, sorting through old things of my father's that I'd put off dealing with for too long. It wasn't an invitation. He knocked, said he heard the noise, and offered to help. "I'm strong," he added, almost shy and kind of bored. I let him in. He moved like someone who wasn't sure if he was allowed to be in the room. Careful hands kept at his sides unless they were lifting something. He never brushed against me, never looked too long. Still, I could feel the space between us changing. When he reached up to grab a box from the high shelf, his shirt lifted slightly, showing a glimpse of skin just above his waistband, smooth and tight, warm from exertion. I looked away so quickly it left me dizzy, but not quickly enough. When he turned, our eyes met for just a moment. In that brief instant, it was like an undeniable spark passed between us. He went quiet, completely still. He just set the box on the table and asked if I wanted to keep it or get rid of it. We didn't talk about that moment. But from then on, every time he came upstairs, there was unspoken tension hanging in the air between us. He started showing up more often. He'd arrive with innocent excuses, a question about the lease, needing to borrow duct tape, wanting to return something that was never supposed to be returned. Once he mentioned cookies, he had baked them from a mix. "They're a little burnt," he said, "but still warm." I took one. He waited expectantly. "Well?" he asked. I nodded slightly. "Better than almost everything else I've had this week." He smiled and decided to stay. I should have told him to leave. I should have set boundaries to remind him and myself what our relationship was. Landlord and tenant, just business. But I poured 2 glasses of milk and sat across from him at the table. That night we didn't touch. We sat there with our cookies and slow sips of milk, our laughter creating an ease that felt almost too comfortable. When he left, his eyes lingered on me, hinting at unspoken words hanging in the air between us. His hand hovered in the air like he was thinking about gently touching my arm. He just didn't, but my skin still burned in that spot. A week later, I saw him outside again, working on a bike tire without a shirt. With each push of the air pump, the muscles in his back tightened and moved, creating a captivating display of strength. The heat was brutal, nearly 100 degrees. Sweat beads caught the sunlight as they traced down his neck and shoulders. I found myself on the porch. He looked up, squinting against the light. "Hey, hot day," I said. "Yeah, could probably melt." He stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and gave me a knowing smile. "Want some water?" I asked. "You read my mind." He drank from the glass I handed him, taking his time. I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed. We didn't talk much. But his eyes stayed on me, not bold, not pushy, like he wasn't sure if he had permission to keep looking. I never told him to stop. It was the moment he dared to step closer. Just one step forward, not enough to close the gap, but enough to feel its tension. I stayed still. He stayed still too. We lingered in that moment, time stretching endlessly around us. The smell of his drying sweat hung in the air. I noticed how his chest rose and fell with each breath. And for the first time, I let myself really think about what it would feel like to kiss him. He didn't say anything, didn't move closer, didn't try at all. But his fingers curled against the glass, and he looked at my lips. And I swear I lost my breath completely. He left after that, said thank you, and stepped back without touching me, but something had definitely changed. We both knew it. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, my heart pounding in my throat, wondering if I had imagined it all. But I hadn't. There was a shift in the air around us, and I knew that the next time he came close, I wouldn't be the one to stop it. It happened on a Tuesday. Not a romantic evening, not a special occasion, not a movie scene with rain or candles flickering. Just Tuesday. I was coming home late from grocery shopping, still in my work clothes, the blouse sticking to my skin in the heat, hair damp and sticking to my neck. I remember being annoyed that I'd forgotten to buy butter. That's how ordinary it all felt. Then there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, just that soft, almost hesitant knock I'd started to associate with him. Ryan stood in the dim light, wearing a black t-shirt and basketball shorts, a small fan in his hand. "My AC is struggling," he said, a hint of embarrassment in his voice. I thought I might steal some cool air from upstairs. I laughed, my mind too tired to fully process the situation. "Want to file a formal complaint?" "No," he said quickly. "Just take your time, unless I can spare a minute to talk." It was small talk, meaningless conversation, nothing dangerous in the words. But underneath, there was something else heavier, quieter, waiting for its moment. I stepped back. "Sure, come in." He walked past me into the kitchen like it was routine, like he had every right to be there. The sun was setting, casting soft amber light across the tiles. I set the grocery bags on the counter and started unpacking like it was any other evening. But my hands felt unusually warm, and my skin tingled with sharp awareness. He leaned against the opposite counter, watching closely, not in an obviously suggestive way, but with a subtlety that spoke volumes. Calm but engaged. That presence started filling the room, creating an atmosphere so thick it felt almost suffocating. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, looking down. "Long day." "Yeah," he said, then there was silence. "You seem tense." I smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Welcome to adult life." Another moment of silence. "How can I help?" It was the way he said it. Not playful or teasing, just honest, like he would genuinely care if I asked for something. Like the offer was real. I looked up and time seemed to stop. He wasn't trying to be attractive. His expression was unreadable. His eyes were fixed on me like the slightest movement might send me running. I took a deep breath, then another. When I moved closer to him, he stayed still. Not even when I got close enough to smell the faint scent of soap on his skin, something clean and pure. My fingers moved instinctively, sliding over his arm before I could stop them. His skin was warm. He pulled back, but only slightly, not from fear but from realization. "Ryan," I started. He shook his head gently, a subtle gesture full of unspoken thoughts. "I know." I didn't know what he meant by that. I didn't ask. I just let my hand rest a little heavier on his arm and watched his breath catch. His eyes searched mine, almost nervous, almost asking. Then he stepped closer. I felt his chest near mine, not touching, just hovering. Just a fraction more and we'd shatter everything. His hand brushed my hip, a fleeting touch that sent shivers through me. He hesitated, pulling back just an inch, like he wasn't sure if I would let him go further. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I know," I said. "So are you." We stayed in that moment, time stretching into eternity. Then I moved closer and pressed my lips to his. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't confident. It happened gently, with tender hesitation that trembled in the air. His lips touched mine like he couldn't quite believe this moment was real. His hand slid up my side, warm and careful fingers gripping the fabric of my blouse. Like he was looking for something to anchor him as we pulled apart. The moment went quiet, his lips staying closed. He looked at me like I was a mystery, something completely unreachable. I looked away, not to end it, but to breathe, to think. But he followed. He stayed behind me, the warmth radiating from him noticeable in the air. When I leaned back ever so slightly, he didn't hesitate to respond. His arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer to him. His breath whispered against my neck, his body pressed against mine, and something inside me broke wide open. I turned, holding his face in my hands, and kissed him with an intensity that was undeniable. His lips met mine with new urgency, shedding all hesitation. His hands crept under my shirt, slow and deliberate, gentle but insistent, simply bold. He touched me like it was a dream he'd once imagined, then questioned, and finally found himself unable to resist. We moved silently down the hallway into the bedroom. My blouse fell to the floor, followed by his shirt. His hands moved across my hips, then slid to my back, and finally held my face like he was torn between what to embrace. I pulled him down with me onto the bed. He hovered just above, his eyes fixed on me like he was still struggling with the idea that I truly existed. "Are you okay?" he whispered softly. I nodded, my breath caught in my throat. "Yes." His lips brushed my collarbone, then traveled lower. His mouth moved with gentle warmth, lingering in a slow, intoxicating dance like he was discovering every hidden part of me. My hands explored his back, following the elegant line of his spine, feeling the tremor in his muscles as I drew him closer. When he finally entered me, he let out a sharp breath, quiet, completely broken. I wrapped my legs around his hips. I held the back of his neck. I breathed his name softly, and electricity ran through his entire body. He moved with deliberate grace, each movement filled with subtle tension, like he was trying to protect me from pain, like he wasn't sure how much of himself he was willing to give. It wasn't polished. It wasn't rehearsed. It was all too human, complicated, and pulsing and real. In that moment, I felt him shake, truly shake, his hold growing tighter, breath catching in his throat. He pressed his face into my shoulder, seeking comfort in my warmth, and I held him. I let him take the lead. Afterward, we stayed there, unsure what to do next. He lay next to me, his hand gently resting on my stomach, his eyes filled with uncertainty and curiosity. I stared at the ceiling, my breathing uneven, my heart pounding hard. Silence surrounded the moment, heavy and making any attempt at comfort useless. He finally turned and whispered, "You're not mad at me, are you?" I blinked, momentarily caught off guard, and once again, a piece of me broke. I took his hand, squeezing gently. "Not at all," I said in an unfiltered voice. "I'm mad at myself." But I held on tight, so did he. The morning after, I found myself struggling with the reflections staring back at me. I sat on the edge of the bed, the sheet wrapped around my waist, staring at the floor like it held answers I desperately needed. Ryan lay beside me, sleeping peacefully, his breathing gentle and rhythmic. He turned toward the window. In the soft light, he looked almost childlike, still too young. My skin felt uncomfortably tight. I slipped out of bed quietly, wrapping myself in a robe, being careful not to wake him. I needed distance, fresh air, something to ground me before the weight of my actions surrounded me with shame. Looking in the bathroom mirror, the reflection staring back felt like a complete stranger. My lips were swollen and tender. My eyes were rimmed with tiredness that didn't come from lack of sleep. I had entered territory that was permanently changed, and even worse, I hadn't been forced. I had just turned the handle and opened the door. I had pulled him closer. I had wanted to. The reflection looked back like it held untold secrets. I walked into the kitchen, pouring a glass of water, my hands shaking slightly, making the ice clink softly against the glass. The apartment was hushed and still. Every part of me wanted to return to normal, but nothing would ever be the same. Not after the way he touched me, not after how I let him take control. He appeared an hour later, unshaven, shirtless, hair messy, his eyes locked on mine with a silent question, like he wasn't sure if unspoken rules allowed him to break the silence. "Good morning," he said gently. I nodded slightly. "There's coffee." He approached the counter carefully, each step measured like he was walking on thin ice, careful not to disturb the fragile atmosphere, like I had become the delicate thing now. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked, his voice uncertain. I swallowed hard. "Not right now." Ryan held back. He stayed by the fridge, drinking slowly, eyes watching me over the edge of the cup like I might vanish into thin air. For a moment, I envied him. How easily he kept breathing, like the weight of it hadn't settled on his chest yet. But it would. The guilt crept in gradually, a persistent ache under my ribs that I desperately tried to push away. But as the hours passed, it sank deeper, becoming heavier. It wasn't just what we had done. It was who we were in those moments that defined everything. I wasn't his girlfriend. I was underneath him. I held the keys to his home. I was a woman weighed down by bills and the marks of time, with a son who had once shared the baseball field with Ryan 10 years ago. Evan would have recognized that face anywhere. That realization crawled up my spine like ice, sending chills through me. Later that afternoon, after Ryan had gone back to his apartment, I found myself on the couch, staring at the TV but completely unaware of what was playing. I was lost in memories, his hand on my waist, the soft whisper of my name, and how I instinctively responded like it belonged to me again. I hated how much I already missed it. The next day, I started pulling away from him, not in obvious ways, just subtle changes. I closed the blinds, pretended to be on the phone when he knocked, left early for errands to avoid any chance of running into him. He noticed on the fourth day. He found me by the mailboxes. "Have I done something wrong?" he asked softly. I stood still, my heart racing. "No," he moved closer. "Then why does it feel like you're avoiding me?" "I'm not. You won't even look at me." My eyes met his. "I'm looking at you now." He flinched at the sharp edge in my voice. Immediately, I felt bad. "Sorry," I said quietly. "I just need some time." He was quiet for a moment. "I miss you," he said. Oh, that word miss. Like we had shared something real. Like this was the end of a love affair instead of him being a young man in his 20s who didn't realize what we had done wasn't glamorous. I looked away. "This can't continue, Ryan." "Why not?" "Because I know better." I lost my composure. That left him speechless. I felt the change in his posture, the withdrawal, the sharp pain of understanding. He didn't argue, just stepped back, nodded silently, and walked down the steps. That night, I found myself at my bedroom window again, looking at the flickering light from his apartment below, caught between hoping he would come back and secretly wishing he wouldn't. The weeks that followed were chaotic. He went quiet. I didn't ask. But we kept finding each other in those brief moments, shared looks in the hallway, unexpected encounters filled with undeniable tension. He'd look at me like the spark was still there, like it had never faded, and I'd look back wishing it had. The most painful part wasn't just missing his touch on my skin. I missed the way he looked at me. He looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than my tired eyes, boring grocery lists, and endless rent notices. He made me feel wanted, a feeling I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. But the guilt stayed, refusing to fade. It became more intense, more vivid. Evan's voice started filling my mind, asking about summer break, about the friends he left behind. I imagined his reaction if he found out, the betrayal he would feel, and the shame that would settle in his heart. Ryan seemed unburdened by that fear. He sent me a text late one night that left me confused about what it meant. "I think about you all the time." I didn't respond. The next day he was subdued but still kind and respectful. But there was something diminished about him, like he had hidden part of himself, unsure if it was safe to show it again. But I found myself starring longer than I meant to. The age gap started feeling bigger under the spotlight. You could see it in how he talked about his future, like it was still being written, in how he lit up discussing video games, weekend road trips, and cheap tacos from food trucks I'd forgotten about since I was 24. It was more than just time that separated us. It was life itself. And yet, part of me still wanted him. His energy, his hunger, his touch that made me feel like a forbidden secret worth discovering. And that part terrified me. This secret won't stay buried forever. And when it explodes, the damage won't just affect me. I thought I had more time to figure out how to handle this desire. More moments to hide in the shadows before the atmosphere changed, before the weight of my secrets became too much to bear. But it happened in a way I never expected. It wasn't a neighbor or coworker, not even Evan, who first saw the cracks beneath the surface. It was Carol, a mysterious presence who stirred emotions and secrets. She's not nosy, just very observant. The kind of friend who stays quiet until she's pieced together all the details, just waiting for you to fill in the colors. We met for casual lunch one Sunday, a typical gathering where small talk takes priority over real conversation. She told me stories about her daughter getting married, how thrilled everyone was about the new exercise studio opening up, and all the gossip brewing in her reading group. She took a careful sip from her glass, tilting her head with curiosity as she asked, "So, tell me about this young man." I felt my heart skip a beat, completely unprepared for the question. "What young man?" I managed to ask. Carol's smile seemed forced, not quite genuine. "Come on now, don't play games with me. I've seen him around, that tall one with the kind face. He always looks like he's holding back something important, like there are words burning inside him that he's too scared to say out loud." I stayed quiet, hoping she'd drop it, but she moved closer instead. "You think I haven't noticed how he stares at your front door every time I visit?" My mouth went dry. I tried to sound casual. "Everything's completely fine." Carol stared directly into my eyes as if daring me to keep lying. "I never said anything was wrong, but there's something different about you lately. You're glowing, and I know it's not from any face cream." I should have made up some story, told her anything but the truth. Instead, something inside me cracked open. I shook my head, feeling overwhelmed. "It's not some fairy tale, it's a huge mistake." Her expression softened with understanding. "Something you wish you could take back." I couldn't bring myself to answer that either. She didn't push for more details. Instead, she reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "You wouldn't be the first woman to feel things you didn't expect," she whispered gently. "But you need to think about what you're willing to give up just to feel seen again." Those words echoed in my head during the entire walk home. For several days after that, I avoided Ryan completely, not because I was angry, but because I was terrified. Scared that whatever was happening between us had spiraled out of my control, that Evan would find out, or even worse, that it would turn into something ugly and twisted, nothing like the quiet, painful honesty it started from. But then came that night when he showed up at my door again, well past 10 o'clock. I froze before answering. When I opened the door, I was shocked by how he looked. He appeared completely drained, like he hadn't slept in days. His voice shook as he spoke. "I think I'm in over my head." I stepped aside and let him come in. He stood in my hallway looking lost and unsure, like a stranger in a place that used to feel safe and familiar. "I never meant for this to happen," he admitted quietly. "I thought it was just a moment, something we both needed. But I can't stop thinking about you. Even when you're not around, I feel you everywhere, even when I tell myself this is wrong." My chest tightened painfully. "Ryan, look, I know I'm older than you. I know this whole thing is messy and complicated. But you make me feel real, like I actually matter. I know this probably isn't the right time to say this, but—" He stopped, swallowed hard, and looked down at the floor. "I think I'm falling for you." It was exactly what I'd been dreading most, because I believed every word he said. That made everything so much worse. He wasn't playing games or chasing some fantasy. He was too young to understand how badly this could destroy him. How quickly something beautiful can turn into a nightmare you can't escape. "I can't love you the way you want me to," I whispered. He stepped closer to me. "I don't care about that. You should care about that." His face hardened with frustration. "Why?" "Because I can't even qualify for a home loan yet, because I still get discounts on my music streaming. You think I don't understand what this means? This is crazy." "I do understand. But that doesn't change how I feel when I'm with you." I looked away, feeling crushed by the weight of his honesty. "Ryan, I was already married when you were still in 7th grade. I've been through enough of life to know how complicated things really are. You haven't experienced that yet." He went completely quiet then, just the sound of our breathing filling the space between us. Finally, he spoke again. "You're making it sound like something shameful." I turned to face him, my eyes blazing with emotion. That's when I knew I should have ended this before it started. He looked at me, and for the first time since that night everything changed. I saw something different in his expression, something colder and sharper, like he was finally seeing the gap between our stolen moments and the reality of our situation. "I never forced you into anything," he said quietly. "I know that." "Then don't act like you didn't want this too." I said nothing. He paused, took a step back, his jaw working as emotions battled beneath the surface. "I'm not some clueless kid, you know, I never said you were. But that's what you think. I can see it in your face. Every time I try to be what you need, you remind me that I'm not enough for what you really want." He was absolutely right, and I hated that he was. "I'm sorry," I said softly. He didn't respond. He just turned around and left. That was a week ago. He hasn't come back since then. Sometimes I hear his footsteps on the porch catch pieces of his music floating through the evening air. But the lightness is gone now. That electric tension that filled our quiet moments together, it's completely disappeared. And I can't tell if he hates me now, or if he still feels that same desperate longing that's eating me alive. I haven't told anyone about this. Not even Carol, not even when she asked again if I was okay. Honestly, I don't know what to say. I have no idea how to deal with what's left of whatever we had. What I let us become. I don't even know what to call it. But I do know one thing for cert, there's no going back now. I don't know what comes next. Ryan woke up something in me that had been sleeping for so long. Not just desire, not just physical connection. The feeling of being wanted for who I really am, flaws, age, and all. It was intoxicating. But the moment I let him cross that line, I became someone I don't recognize. And I'm still fighting the part of me that wants him to come back, even though I know how wrong that is.